Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I'm Kevin Richards, Vice President and Head of U.S. Government Affairs for SAP. I'd like to thank the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Chamber Technology Engagement Center, or CTEC, for hosting today's important event on digital transformation. I commend the Chamber for focusing our attention on today's topic of how to better modernize our government for the challenges ahead. Our nation has made much progress in this area of digital transformation, but there is more work left to be done if we are to fully embrace digital government in order to ensure our country transforms from our current crisis to evolve with a more resilient, data-driven, inclusive, and informed digital infrastructure, and one which will be critically needed to combat future pandemics or other national emergencies and economic crises. The continued rise of and advances in digital technology comes at a critical time for the future of our country. The coronavirus pandemic, which caused the world to grind to a halt in so many ways, beginning a little over 1 year ago, demonstrated to all of us how vital digital technology is to people, families, businesses, and governments. If there are any lingering doubts about the necessity of digital transformation to business longevity and the effectiveness of government, the coronavirus has silenced them. In a contactless world, the vast majority of interactions with customers, employees, and citizens must now take place virtually. With rare exception, operating digitally is the only way to stay in business and operate a government through mandated shutdowns and restricted activity. It's go digital or go dark. This digital mandate isn't new. It's simply been brought into sharp focus. Prior to the pandemic, a paradigm shift towards digitalization of the economy was already underway. Current events have accelerated that paradigm, as evidenced by the marked shift in spending towards digital technologies. One of the lessons learned as a result of the pandemic is that clear gaps in our nation's digital infrastructure were exposed between the digital haves and the digital have-nots. Those businesses and government agencies which invested early on in digital technologies prior to the pandemic were able to more quickly and flexibly transition to a new virtual environment. Those who did not make those digital investments struggled mightily to gain their footing in this new and unprecedented environment. In government, we witnessed a few examples of these gaps in our digital infrastructure, which included the following: a lack of a modernized digital U.S. national supply chain to provide our government with real-time insights and awareness into vendors' inventories to track availability and delivery of PPE and other critical medical supplies. Government agencies and hospitals were continuing to still use paper-based forms to track testing cases and the vaccinations of citizens, rather than taking advantage of digital forms, which could provide government officials, healthcare professionals, and the public with real-time data analytics. In aging government IT infrastructure at both federal and state levels of government, many government systems continue to run on COBOL, which is an over 60-year-old computing programming language. As a result, many government survival or stimulus checks cannot be deployed quickly or effectively to citizens. Sites of government agencies in charge of dispersing unemployment assistance, delivering small business loans, or scheduling citizens' vaccination appointments were quickly overwhelmed. That vital lifeline from government to our citizens is too often jeopardized. In addition, a lack of government standards for healthcare interoperability, so health IT systems can more seamlessly connect and provide data across platforms and between government at local, state, and federal levels continues to be lacking. Additionally, we have a siloed digital infrastructure which is not data-driven, making it increasingly challenging for the ability of government to maintain oversight and accountability by tracking the effectiveness of its spending. Finally, a challenging and costly bureaucratic FedRAMP certification process, which slows the ability of government to acquire the best-in-class cloud and other digital technologies into the government's technology infrastructure. But this is a moment to increase collaboration between government and industry. The government should take a pro-tech mindset across all policy areas by launching a national innovation strategy to support the United States tech ecosystem, which is essential to deliver growth, investment, jobs, and innovation in our nation. That means growth not only comes from the technology sector itself, but also from the thousands of businesses, large and small, in a range of sectors that use technology to produce their productivity and deliver growth in their own right. But every American should be asking the question, where we want the nation to be when the COVID pandemic is over. How could emerging technologies being deployed in the current crisis propel us to a better future? Governments, as the first custodian of COVID-19 data, have started publishing statistics about the outbreak that included the number of cases in the country and total facilities, as well as reporting cases by jurisdictions. Reliable information from governments help people make informed decisions about their daily routines, build public trust, as well as enable public authorities to act decisively to flatten the curve. The COVID-19 crisis has also brought new needs for digital government services and more demand on existing services. Developers and governments in the private sector were mobilized and engaged in designing new apps and services to help fight against COVID-19. Some of these new services included delivering food and other essential items, those most needed by optimizing the entire supply chain via digital government services. The COVID-19 pandemic has also strained supply chain for medical supplies. Demand for medical equipment has exponentially increased, creating shortages, often exposing medical personnel to greater risks. To address this problem, many private companies partner with government agencies to develop health apps that help people, hospital staff, and medical practitioners to monitor, analyze, and source critical medical equipment, such as ventilators, face masks, gloves, and protective gear in real time. In addition, digital platforms have been deployed to help community-driven contact tracing of patients that tested positive. We need to build on these current successes of public-private partnerships to improve digital government services. I'd like to end by commending Congress for investing $1 billion in the Technology Modernization Fund as part of the American Rescue Plan. This was truly a landmark occasion and a good first step, but more investment will be needed in order to truly deliver a data-driven government for the American people. I look forward to today's conversation and appreciate the opportunity to join you here today. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Senator Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire. I'm sorry that we couldn't gather together in person, but thank you to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for hosting this virtual gathering on the need to modernize our government's information technology systems. As a member of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee and chair of the Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Spending Oversight, improving our federal IT systems is a major priority of mine. In the 117th Congress, I'm focused on bringing Republicans and Democrats together in order to improve security, increase efficiency, and reduce wasteful spending related to these systems. Our federal IT infrastructure is woefully out of date. This not only opens federal systems up to cyber attacks, but it also fails to provide the level of customer service that the American people expect in the 21st century. The COVID-19 pandemic made these challenges even more clear. Throughout the pandemic, we've seen the federal response to COVID-19 hampered by aging IT systems all across the government. The IRS has struggled to disperse millions of economic relief payments. The Small Business Administration's E-Tran website crashed as it tried to roll out the Payroll Protection Program. It is unacceptable that, in many cases, our systems struggled to meet expectations in a crisis. I'm also concerned that the federal government spends more taxpayer dollars on maintaining old IT systems rather than investing in new, agile, and secure systems. In fiscal year 2019, $29 billion, or roughly one-third of total IT spending, was dedicated to maintaining legacy systems, which are outdated systems that are no longer supported by the vendor, require highly specialized personnel to maintain, and often do not support current software or current agency needs. And as the amounts spent to operate and maintain these outdated existing systems increase each year, government-wide investment in major IT projects has declined. We need to do more to move away from outdated systems and invest in technology that is efficient, secure, and meets the needs of the American people. Last summer, I wrote to the 10 government agencies with legacy IT systems most in need of critical updates, and I asked them for their plans to move away from legacy IT. I'll keep pushing agencies on plans to update these systems, and I'm pleased that the Biden administration has made clear that it is committed to IT modernization. To support modernization, the bipartisan COVID-19 relief and government funding bill that was signed into law at the end of last year included $12.5 million for information technology oversight and reform activities. Now, the recently passed American Rescue Plan included nearly $2 billion for cybersecurity and technology modernization programs. That funding gives $1 billion to the Technology Modernization Fund, which government agencies can use to modernize their IT systems. I'm focused on additional bipartisan legislation to assist in modernization efforts. Last year, the President signed into law the Bipartisan Information Technology Modernization Centers of Excellence Program Act, a bill I worked on with Republican Senator Rob Portman to help modernize federal government systems, as well as improve the efficiency of those modernization efforts. Moving forward, I'll keep partnering with Republicans and Democrats in Congress, the administration, and those in the private sector to bolster IT modernization throughout our government. Thank you again to the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event. I look forward to our continued work together.
Good afternoon. My name is Jordan Crenshaw, and I'm Executive Director of the Chamber's Technology Engagement Center, or CTEC. This is an important issue today, as you've heard so far, and what may be considered somewhat of a wonky issue within the Beltway in terms of federal IT. This is also an issue that has major and real-world impacts upon whether or not individuals have access to public health or whether or not they're able to make a living during a crisis. And it's because of this important nature of this issue with regard to things like international competitiveness and the ability to have real-time solutions to major crises. CTEC is launching its 8th working group devoted to ensuring the government modernizes infrastructure and digitally transforms its IT systems. I would ask today, too, that if you have any interest in learning about what we're working on in this space, to visit www.americaninnovators.com/digital transformation to learn more about what the Chamber and CTEC are doing in this space. We've got a great industry panel lined up today to talk about some of the issues before us as we're dealing with these critical crises before us, issues like inclusion and the pandemic and economic recovery. We've got Gordon Bitko, Cinnamon Rogers, and Bill Wright to provide some industry perspectives. And what I'd like to go ahead and do is I'll go ahead and start in alphabetical order. So I'll go with you, Gordon, to start, maybe Cinnamon, and then Bill. Just introduce yourself, tell you where you're coming from, and a little bit about what you do.
Jordan, first off, thanks for having me on today. It's great that the Chamber is putting on this panel. It certainly is a critical issue. I am the lead for the public sector program for ITI, the Information Technology Industry Council. We are a trade association that focuses globally on competition and innovation for the technology industry writ large. I've been in this role about 1.5 years, so I represent the industry perspective now, but I also come to this with a perspective of the reality within government. I was the CIO at the FBI for about 4 years before I left for this job. Thanks again for having me, Jordan.
Hi, Cinnamon Rogers. I joined DocuSign just 2 months ago to lead their government affairs operations. Our company, of course, everyone knows, is the pioneer of the electronic signature. We now also provide a full suite of tools to digitize the agreement process itself. And we're really appreciative that the Chamber and CTEC has launched this new working group. So thank you so much.
Hi there. I'm Bill Wright, Director of Government Affairs at Splunk. Been on board for about 3 years now. We are the Data to Everything platform. We're pretty ubiquitous across the federal agencies, and we're in 91 of the Fortune 100. Our technology really helps customers drive outcomes across security, IT, DevOps, with a data platform built for the cloud. And just to echo Cinnamon and Gordon here, thank you so much for the Chamber's efforts around IT modernization. It couldn't really come at a more important time than now. So thank you.
No, thank you. No, I think this is going to be a really great panel. A lot of great information to come from it. During the pandemic, government at every level has needed to continue functioning despite the fact that many of its employees were working from home and the physical offices that they were in provided much needed services were closed. These unfortunate circumstances have highlighted where IT modernizing and digitization can play a role during a crisis and beyond. What sort of technology adoption trends or examples did you see at the state and really the federal level during this unusual past year?
I'm happy to kick that off, Jordan. So DocuSign, of course, we offer software tools to digitize a full range of paper processes. So yes, last year was certainly eye-opening in terms of learning more about how local, state, and federal agencies still have in place very involved bureaucratic paper processes. What we found was when we were able to educate an agency and provide digital alternatives, the adoption of beneficial technological solutions like e-signature, contract lifecycle management, and more, agencies really jumped to adopt these solutions to ensure the continuity of their services and functions, which of course are important all of the time, but critical during times of great uncertainty like we've been living through. For DocuSign, we partnered with a number of agencies last year. I thought I'd give a couple quick examples. In New York during the pandemic, the New York State Department of Labor saw an over 1,300% increase in unemployment claims, totaling at one point over 1.8 million active claims. This was obviously massive. There was a massive increase, and it created a crippling problem that meant the Department of Labor, they really had to address this either by sending all their forms out by snail mail or by email, which they could do on average 10 emails an hour. Neither of those were scalable solutions. So we were able to partner with the New York DOL to build a digital process. It allowed them to send out 570,000 unemployment insurance certifications to New York residents in under 72 hours. That resulted in millions of payments issued within just 1 week. I think that's a really great example of where digitization can play a huge role. It allowed people who needed to feed their families, pay their mortgage, their rent, do so because they got benefits quickly. One other quick example in Texas, we had partnered with the Texas Workforce Commission. They were having some onboarding issues related to getting their employees up and running. They had really outdated processes. And so we were able to partner with them to replace their really inefficient fax and mail-based processes with a fully digital and secure solution so that now they can onboard around 1,000 new hires every year. So putting that system into place not only cleared the path for new hiring to go more smoothly for the indefinite future, but also allowed that team to instead be focusing on their strategic priorities. So those are just a few examples from the last year.
Yeah. And just to build a little bit on Cinnamon's specific example, I think there's a lot of lessons learned as a result of the pandemic. I think if there's one silver lining to come over this past year, it's that IT modernization has really dramatically accelerated, I think, over the past year. In this way, the government has come further, in many ways, it's come further in the last year than maybe the last 10 years combined in modernizing and adopting commercial capabilities. I think now more than ever, agencies are aware of the possibilities that they can achieve in technology transformation. You look at some individual agencies like GSA, agencies that were already pretty heavily invested in cloud, modern digital tools, modern digital processes. They fared much better through this pandemic and were better able to meet the demands of new programs, excess bandwidth for employee operations, and the incredible increase in citizen service requests. I mean, who would have thought last year at this time that an appreciable percentage of the federal workforce would be working remotely, or that veterans would be conducting their checkups via telehealth appointments. The fact that nearly 1 million defense employees began telework almost overnight, I think was a really strong testament to not just the leadership of the Pentagon, but also the close partnership that can exist between government and industry to kind of help achieve outcomes. The pandemic, I think, has shown in very real and dramatic ways how agencies can leverage cloud, agile development, digital services to deal with exigent circumstances like the COVID pandemic, and then whatever future crises we have coming down the road.
If I could just build a little bit on what Bill was saying, I think the pandemic really has been a forcing function. Agencies that have leveraged commercial services and commercial capabilities and adopted those rather than trying to take those and fit them to their own practices are the ones who've fared the best. It's the agencies, the organizations that have said we're special and different, and we've got to build a custom tool, a custom product, a custom workflow, or they haven't even moved into an electronic process yet because they feel like they're so special. Those are the ones that have been most challenged in effectively providing services to citizens and doing them at scale and in a reliable way during the pandemic. The Department of Defense example that Bill gave is great. They've been able to take advantage of commercial services and the elasticity that the cloud offers to have millions of people accessing those globally and not coming into the office. And a year on, that's been a really amazing transformation. I was just having a conversation yesterday with a senior executive in the Air Force. He's still working from home after a year and is able to do it effectively and really drive change in the organization. I think those sort of things really do highlight the opportunities and the challenges that exist.
So I think, we've heard some of the good, and now let's get a little bit into the not so good. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted how we haven't achieved the objective of modernized systems. Now, what are some of the best examples of how government can save time and money by investing in modernizing their infrastructure? What are some examples that both the federal and state governments need to do to digitally transform?
So I'll start on Jordan 1 a little bit outside of the box, but I think and I hope that government is going to think about their use of space differently. And that's, today the real estate bill is probably the largest single thing for most agencies. The pandemic has highlighted that you don't need physical space for every employee all the time. They should be rethinking their work environment, their workspace, encouraging and enabling telecommuting in a secure and reliable way. And looking to ways to cut the bill, to cut the real estate bill, the power bill, all the utilities associated with keeping that facility open. Many times it's an old, out-of-date facility that's not environmentally safe and has a whole host of other issues as well. So I think that's a really great opportunity. The other thing that I think is really important to be looking at here is to use this for agencies as an opportunity to change the way they engage with the public, with citizens, with customers who are expecting their services and are unfortunately used to the traditional experience, the state level or the local level of going and standing online at the DMV for hours or all day long. And again, states have shown that that doesn't have to be the way that we do it, but it requires them rethinking the way that they manage those processes and rethinking those services. And I think that's where the real challenge lies. Some organizations, some states, some federal agencies have been great at doing that, and others have been a little bit more constrained by inertia and have not really made that transformation.
Yeah, I think those are great points, Gordon. A couple more. I think first and foremost, to sort of paraphrase Senator Hassan in the opening there, I think we need to retire legacy IT systems and outdated business practices. These legacy systems and practices really only serve to stifle innovation, divert resources, precious resources, impede effective cybersecurity, and perhaps more importantly, they really hinder the citizen service delivery, and we saw a lot of that. And I think it's been especially acute during this pandemic, where delivery of citizen service has really been transformed. One example of this was with our veterans. At the outset of COVID-19 pandemic, the Department of Veterans Affairs encountered a massive surge in demand for telehealth services. As a result of this, the veterans and clinicians experienced significantly degraded video call quality, with calls being dropped thousands of times per day. In response, we, Splunk, partnered with the VA's site reliability engineers who leveraged Splunk's SaaS platform and IT services intelligence solution. And together we were able to identify and remedy multiple misconfigurations within that telehealth application. What this did in human terms, this ended up reducing the number of failed virtual appointments from thousands per day to under 10. And the important and real human element here is that veterans were able to get their critical services they needed and, of course, deserved. It's also led to unprecedented levels of insights, I think, into the performance of critical delivery of care applications, helping future services for those veterans. So governments at the state and local levels are all filled with interesting examples like this. So a potential silver lining, I think, to the pandemic here.
And I can just pipe in here. You know, when I joined DocuSign a few months ago, I learned some new stats that I thought were particularly striking and certainly relevant to this conversation. At the federal level alone, every year, government agencies combined spend nearly $40 billion on paperwork processes. And across all federal agencies, there are 23,000 unique forms and 113 billion forms processed every year. So in addition to the cost, that adds huge inefficiencies and therefore loss of productivity that is a result of all these outdated processes. Based on our benchmarking stats, you know, going digital saves about $36 per paper process. It's 94% more efficient in terms of turnaround time, 84% fewer errors. For companies like DocuSign that are FedRAMP certified, there's a high level of security that's also baked into every digital process. So also, when you have less paper and less need to travel, there are environmental benefits as well. Since DocuSign launched in 2003, we've saved around 20 billion sheets of paper, 2.5 billion gallons of water, and over 140 million pounds of waste that's resulted in the Earth being spared over 2 billion pounds of additional CO2. So the bottom line is that the adoption of digital transformation tools allows for faster, simpler, more environmentally friendly, and more cost-efficient processes with a better experience for the public and for government employees.
You know, I think we see some of the potential benefits we're not reaping quite yet. But you know, what are the impediments to modernization? Is it agency culture, funding? How do we best bridge the gap to digitally transform government?
I can jump in here. You know, I think agency culture and funding probably both play a pretty significant role in slowing the pace of modernization. A key to accelerating modernization of governments is to ensure that agencies can easily and effectively acquire commercial capabilities. A little bit of what Gordon spoke about earlier. You know, unfortunately, the budgeting and appropriations process really doesn't provide that necessary flexibility, I think, to drive true modernization. The current model restricts the ability of agencies to invest in modern commercial capabilities, incentivizes maintaining those outdated and nearly obsolete systems, and leads to some pretty wasteful and failing projects. You know, on the funding front, Senator Hassan mentioned having that $1 billion in the Technology Modernization Fund is a really good first step, and thank you to the Chamber for working so hard to make sure that money was there. I think it's going to be critical to help address many of these common challenges still hampering effective IT transformation across the government, such as identity management, security automation, leveraging real-time AI ML, and other emerging technologies to enhance those citizen services delivery. You know, our next challenge with these funds is going to be to try to rack up some quick wins to show the appropriators, you know, what we can do. The money should be used to deal with sort of the immediate challenges, and I think it's incumbent upon OMB and GSA to use those authorities that they already have to really quickly get that money out the door into high priority projects within the agencies so we can rack up some wins.
Yeah, I think Bill really hit the nail on the head there. You know, the main point here is that it's too hard for the government to acquire technology at speed and scale. It takes far too long. Looking back on my prior experience, there were too many times where by the time I could acquire and buy and put a product to use, it was already out of date. It had already been superseded by a newer product, a newer, better version. The government really has to figure out how to get out of its own way to acquire and use commercial technologies securely.
I think we're having a little trouble hearing you right there. Cinnamon, maybe we'll go to you real quick on that.
Sure. So I agree completely with Gordon and Bill. Funding and culture play a huge role. The 21st Century Idea Act, which passed in 2018, required agencies to go digital, but those agencies now need the funding to get that started. And like others, we strongly supported the inclusion of the $1 billion in funding for TMF in the last stimulus package, and we think it illustrates the recognition that long-term savings accrue through the adoption of IT modernization and digitization. And now our hope is that the rules and processes involved in distributing those funds is put into place to make sure that those funds get out the door quickly and effectively. And again, like others have stated, many agencies do operate in an outdated culture with older policies, and certainly they take a more conservative approach, some agencies, but this is where education is key, which is why forums like today are so important, and why we're so appreciative the Chamber and CTEC are, launching this new working group to raise the visibility of these issues. And we certainly look forward to working with all the stakeholders to keep educating local, state, and federal policymakers on all the benefits of IT modernization.
Thank you. I wouldn't, I'd be remiss in not bringing up the issue of security when it comes to modernizing federal and state systems. We work hand in hand with our cyber intelligence and supply chain security team here at the Chamber, and they do a great job at making sure we have good policies to make sure that systems are protected. But with recent high-profile cyber attacks against the federal government, how should the federal government be thinking about better securing their systems? How can we improve our agency-wide cyber programs, CDM, et cetera, to improve our chances of detecting new threats? And maybe, Gordon, I'll give you a chance if you want to say anything you wanted to say during the technical glitch.
Thanks. I think that Bill and Cinnamon we were all kind of talking about the same challenges that exist there. And I think there's actually a good connection, Jordan, from those to some of these security issues as well. It's a cultural challenge here too, to a great degree. Technology is an important part of the solution, but the bigger issue in thinking about cybersecurity is thinking about it that it's not a compliance issue. It's not I've bought a tool, I've bought a product, I've had my ATO, I'm good, I'm secure, I'm reliable. It's having that culture and the mindset of thinking constantly about what's the highest risk and how are you applying all the tools and resources that you have to look out for those risks, to protect those products and services and those data that are at the greatest risk. That is really at its heart a cultural change throughout the government. It's government collectively thinking about how to solve those problems, and at the same time figuring out how to apply the tools to those highest risk situations in ways that unfortunately we don't do. We're still by and large, when it comes to cybersecurity, far too much in a compliance and reactive mindset.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And Gordon, as you probably know better than anyone, the cyber threat landscape is evolving. Cyber attacks are growing both in complexity and sheer number. The government, of course, has a duty to keep data and citizen data secure. But good, solid security, I think, can be an enabler to innovation and not necessarily be an impediment, if you know what I mean. If innovative commercial technology can be inherently more secure than many of these old legacy systems we're discussing, that's not just good for improving efficiency, and the performance of government, but also makes it more secure. I think we need closer public-private partnership, leveraging private sector technology and expertise with the government's unique authorities and capabilities as well. As for some of the agency-wide cybersecurity programs like CDM, I think we need to evolve the program and really fully leverage the data and its capabilities. When the federal government first launched CDM program, it was intended to give agencies the tools they need to know definitively who and what assets were operating on their networks. Today, it's the current dashboards have good value for compliance, but they do not lead to a major improvement in the government's ability to prevent or stop sophisticated cyber attacks from nation state adversaries. What agencies I think are starting to really appreciate now is how the CDM program is generating a treasure trove of dynamically integrated IT operating and security data capable of helping these agencies establish a more comprehensive view of what they have. CISA should really try to invest maybe in operationalizing this wealth of sensor data that's already coming in to CDM.
So I'll go ahead and kick it off for a few brief final words. Any general takeaways you all would like to have our guests here today? So I'll start, Senator, with you.
No, again, I just want to thank the Chamber for putting a spotlight on this issue. It's critically important, and we've learned some great lessons from the last year, and now let's carry them forward and make some progress.
Yeah.
Bill?
Yeah, to kind of end on a high note here, I think if there's a silver lining that we can all look back on over this past year, it's that our government has managed to really, modernize in a lot of ways. We need to keep that momentum going. I think we have buy-in from the administration and from Congress, so I'm feeling quite optimistic. And thank you to the Chamber.
Jordan, thanks. I'll wrap up by echoing thank you for putting on the event and for having us. I think the takeaway has got to be that there is a connection between being innovative and driving competition and modernizing and being secure and reliable and delivering services to customers and to users and consumers of what the government does. Those things are not exclusive. For too long, they've all been thought of independently, and people haven't thought about the importance of IT and IT modernization to the government's ability to fulfill its basic missions. It's always been an afterthought. The pandemic has really illustrated that can't be the case, that agencies have to be thinking about all those things inclusively. And I hope that the $1 billion that is in the TMF this year is the first step down that road. It's certainly not enough, but it's a great start, and hopefully agencies can be successful and build upon that.
I think in terms of a key takeaway from the Chamber is we're making progress, but we've got a long ways to go. But if you'd like to see about more of our efforts, you can look at www.americaninnovators.com/digital transformation. I'd like to thank SAP, BlackBerry, our panelists as well, Senator Hassan, and then also Congressman Issa, who is coming next. But thanks again, and great panel, and appreciate talking with you all today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to discuss the continued need for our government modernization in its IT systems. As people of the Chamber know, this is a choice that government has made to remain hooked to legacy systems that long ago should have been scrapped. We need to pick up the pace in transition of government systems and run a more modern and efficient programs on modern platforms. Vast resources are used to maintain old and even completely outdated systems. Terms like Fortran and COBOL come to mind for all of us who remember those programs fondly, but recognize that programs written that way are of little use in a modern era. We need to transition the focus of our funds to bring new technology to government. Just as government was late to the cloud, but played catch up, we can, in fact, having been late to modernize our databases, leapfrog those, and that is a passion that I've had and that I return to Congress with. I have focused on the need for IT reforms in a variety of ways, including the Data Act, the MGT Act, and as co-chair of the Smart Cities Caucus. Each of these are an opportunity to get government thinking the right way and, in fact, passing laws that enable them. I particularly want to note the bill, the Data Act, was a collaborative effort with the late Elijah Cummings. He and many people on the Oversight Committee on both sides of the aisle recognize that money wasted in government is not political. It is, in fact, a challenge that both parties need to work together. Since the passage of the Data Act, we have sought to force the bureaucracy to actually recognize the potential of the Act and the implementation. To date, I would say we have a C- in that area. In discussions with Senator Mark Warner recently, he gave it that grade and said he was being kind. But that doesn't mean that we can't get to a B or an A. For example, legislatures authorized the Treasury Department to create Data Analytic Center to enable law enforcement and federal agencies and IG to have interoperable databases that they can share with confidence. As we go into a new administration, which builds on the work done by the Obama administration early on and by the Trump administration, we don't want to take any steps backwards, just the opposite. Both of these administrations at the top supported implementation of the Data Act and a recognition that there was so much to do and we needed to do it efficiently with cooperation with Congress, but most importantly, forcing the cooperation of the various branches. With the leadership of the Treasury Department, I believe that we can, in fact, push through these changes. I look forward to working with the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, the Treasury Department, and other major stakeholders in the weeks and months to come, in addition to some follow-on legislation that is currently being put together with Senator Warner and myself. I look forward to briefing you on these as time passes. We could go on with a number of important pieces of legislation, including FATARA, which helped modernize and has a lot more to be done. But instead of dwelling on that, let me close simply by saying that Congressman Jerry Connolly, Senator Portman, and Senator Warner have all committed to work with me on a completely nonpartisan basis to push through these and other changes in the months to come. All of us are committed to work like there is no tomorrow. There is no second 2 years of this administration, and there's no time for the government to really begin providing information in a transparent way for the benefit of the management of government and the transparency to the public. I look forward to working with the Chamber and would ask you only to keep the heat on, keep the pressure on, and know that you have partners inside on both sides of the dome to work with.
Hello, I'm Sparky Zivin, the Global Head of Research and Analytics at the advisory firm Teneo. As Jordan mentioned at the outset, this can be seen at times as a fairly wonky inside the Beltway issue. So working with CTEC, we wanted to go out and understand what the broader perspective is from corporate executives across the country to understand what kind of impact the current state of federal government IT infrastructure is having on real businesses. What are the top challenges that those executives believe IT modernization efforts should tackle, and how should the government go about modernizing its IT infrastructure? To do that, we surveyed 165 CIOs and CTOs of mid to large size companies across the US and across different industries. The data is very fresh. It was conducted just earlier this month. And the results show us that US businesses are unified in their views and the need for the modernization of government IT infrastructure. For example, 92%, almost every single one of the executives we surveyed, supports the idea of including IT modernization funding in any kind of COVID or economic recovery efforts the government puts forward right now. That's a tremendous amount of agreement, and it's very rare in this kind of research to see all of these executives speaking with one voice. So the natural question is, why? Why would these executives be so united in their view that this is such a critical aspect of economic recovery? The answer is that it's having a direct impact on so many of their businesses. 1 in 4 of the CIOs or CTOs that we polled says that their business is actually being harmed by the state of government IT infrastructure. And for those companies, it's really coming down to millions of dollars per year that are racked up due to inefficiencies and lost productivity. Half of those companies affected saw an impact of at least $500,000, and 1 in 4 of those businesses impacted said that impact was $1 million or more per year. So the question then becomes, what is the right approach? How should these problems be solved, and what are the root causes? There were 3 main root causes that executives saw when they looked at the challenges facing IT modernization efforts. The first, and many of our speakers today have talked about this, the reliance on custom-built single agency systems. It was the leading challenge that these executives saw when dealing with corporate government IT infrastructure issues. The second was the lack of a multi-year funding strategy. Senator Hassan mentioned this earlier, that not only is this important spend need to happen right now, it needs to be a sustained, deliberate, ongoing support structure to deliver that kind of reliable, predictable funding to make this kind of modernization and transition happen. And lastly, and our panel just talked about this at great length, the failure to embrace private sector solutions. This was seen as the top 3 big issues driving the challenges that businesses are facing when trying to deal with government IT systems. So the question then becomes, if these are the challenges, what are the priorities for fixing these challenges? We asked about a variety of different priorities that executives might have when it comes to solving these challenges. And when we looked at what was extremely important, a handful of priorities emerged at the top. The first was protecting systems from cyber attacks. Kevin mentioned this earlier. This is really critical to make sure that our systems are secure and safe. We also need to make sure that they're improving access to critical solutions and to critical services like PPP loans and benefit access. They need to improve vaccine distribution. This was really important, obviously a critical need right now. Businesses are saying this is essential for their operations. And then finally, speeding up research on emerging challenges, whether it be natural disasters or future pandemics, making sure that government systems are up to the task of solving these increasingly complex challenges were the top priorities for businesses. The question then is, how do we get there? What did these executives think was the path to solving these problems and modernizing IT infrastructure? 3 big priorities when it came to solution solving came about: availability, consistency, and partnership. 91% of those executives we surveyed said that supporting the use of commercial and available industries through agile acquisition strategy was absolutely critical to getting any kind of modernization efforts right. Secondly, they wanted to make sure that that funding and commitment from Congress is there for the long term. 93% of executives we surveyed said that was absolutely essential. And finally, 97%, nearly every single one of the CIOs and CTOs that were included in our survey agree that partnership with the private sector is the best approach to modernization. What this means, 4 big learnings from the study. Outdated federal government IT infrastructure is having a real and tangible and significant cost to American businesses today. And that root cause of that cost is largely seen as single agency systems and a lack of stable and predictable funding streams. These are what are really hampering abilities of businesses to work efficiently and effectively with the federal government. When it comes to how we go about fixing this, they really want to make sure that all of those efforts are really aimed at COVID recovery, modernization, and making sure that these efforts serve the people as effectively as possible. And how we get there, they all agree. They must be agile, commercial, and implemented in partnership with the private sector.
Hi, I'm Ann Keurig. I'm the Director of U.S. Government Affairs and Public Policy for BlackBerry. I want to thank the Chamber and CTEC for organizing this event, and to Senator Hassan and Representative Issa for joining us as well. It's critical that the technology at the federal, state, and local level be able to meet the expectations that we have during a crisis. The investment in technology in the American Recovery Act is a great first step, but much more is needed. Thank you again to the Chamber for organizing the event, and we look forward to working with each of you as we improve the security and digital transformation of our nation. Thanks again.